Hey, oxidative phosphorus. This is Mrs. Reichelt. Goes over metabolism. So we're going to talk a little bit about some review topics like cellular respiration, that sort of thing, and basically how your food is processed and used and turned into energy that you can use. So let's go ahead and get started. The chemical reactions that are necessary to maintain life include catabolism and anabolism. Please note that when I say catabolism, I am not saying cannibalism, but catabolism is when you are breaking down substances and energy is then released. So an example of this would be digestion. So as your food stuff is broken down, that is a form of catabolism because you're breaking down a larger molecule into something smaller. Anabolism is when you're building larger molecules from smaller ones. This would be, the example here would be if you are, we'll say you're lifting weights to try to build muscle mass. That would be anabolism. So your carbohydrate metabolism, basically carbs are the body's preferred source to produce cellular energy. So your carbs are going, or your body will preferentially break down carbohydrates in order to produce ATP. Remember, ATP is adenosine triphosphate, and that's what you're going to use as your metabolic energy. Glucose or blood sugar is the major breakdown product that we use to fuel to make that we use as fuel to generate ATP. So given your you have carbs, you have lipids, and you have protein, you're going to eat all of those, but your body is going to preferentially break down carbs. That's why it's really hard to get rid of fat. It's hard to burn fat if you're working out because your body's always going to break down carbs first. Then it'll break down lipids, and then if it has to, then it'll break down proteins, but that's really detrimental to your body. So cellular respiration is basically when you use oxygen-using events that take place within a cell to create ATP from ADP. Carbon will leave the cell as carbon dioxide, so that's why you breathe out carbon dioxide. Then hydrogen atoms will be combined with oxygen that form water, and energy is produced by these reactions, adds a phosphorus to ADP, that's adenosine diphosphate, to form ATP. The ATP then can be broken down to release energy for cellular use. So the big takeaway I would say from this slide is knowing that you take glucose or sugar plus oxygen, and your body will convert that into carbon dioxide, water, and energy. So at the very minimum, I would write down that chemical equation there. So your metabolic pathways involved in cell respiration occur in 3 different steps. Step 1 is called glycolysis. Glycolysis, glyc means sugar, lyse means split. So glycolysis is just splitting sugar. The second step is the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle produces all of the carbon dioxide and water resulting from cell respiration. It also yields a small amount of ATP. Glycolysis yields a little bit of ATP as well. And then your last step is the electron transport chain. The electron transport chain is what really makes the ATP generation. So hydrogen atoms are removed during the glycolysis and Krebs cycle. They're delivered to protein carriers. Hydrogen is split into hydrogen ions and electrons. So the electron transport chain is generating its energy using those electrons. The electrons will give off energy in a series of steps that enable ATP to be produced. So here's kind of a diagram of what it looks like. So step 1 is glycolysis, meaning that you're splitting sugar. You're going to save some of these high energy electrons that'll go into the ETC. Second step is the Krebs cycle, which will generate a little bit of ATP along with glycolysis. You get a little bit of ATP. And then the last step is the electron transport chain, or oxidative phosphorylation. Oxidative phosphorylation means that you're using redox reactions. So you're oxidizing and you're reducing different compounds to generate a large net quantity of ATP production there. And then the last thing is that you're also going to generate water as well. So your metabolic pathways that are involved here. We use a lot of protein carriers. Some example of those are NADH. NADH basically is responsible for storage of electrons. as we store the NADH, we're storing electrons so they can be used in the electron transport chain. When we get to the electron transport chain, we put that NADH back into the ETC, which removes, or I guess it adds 2 electrons into this chain. Electrons have really crazy high energy, so it allows the continuation of that ETC. The very last step of the ETC is where we have that electron that's going to be given to an oxygen. When the electron goes into that oxygen molecule, it's going to temporarily excite that oxygen molecule, so it will end up making a bond with a hydrogen that's nearby, and when you take oxygen and you add it to hydrogen, you ultimately produce water. Fat metabolism is handled mostly by the liver. It uses some fats to make ATP, but you can synthesize lipoproteins, thromboplastin, and some other cholesterols. When you release the breakdown of products into the blood,